Welcome to the Leading at the Next Level podcast with Dove Development and Consulting, the show built to provide ongoing support for your leadership journey. So I'm Wes Dove, and I want to talk to you today about really identifying what's your clear purpose. So, gosh, why do you do what you do? Cindy and I, as we opened up the 2025 Leadership Legacy Experience, we went into pretty significant detail covering how important it is for every leader to have that clear purpose for accepting all the weight that comes with leading a team, all the responsibilities, everything that they need to do. But let's be honest, very few things in life are worth having that come easy. I mean, nothing comes easy. If it's really worth having, we've got to work for those things. And regardless of what you're engaged in, whether it's personally or professionally, that clear purpose is absolutely critical for rising above the muck and just all the nonsense to make a positive impact for all the people that are counting on us. So the premise of the idea when I wrote the book, Leading with Clear Purpose, I had a phone call one Friday morning. I should have been working on something. I was struggling with some ideas. I just couldn't make headway. Got a phone call from a lifelong friend, and he walked through a scenario that he was facing. And let me back up and say is still to this day one of the hardest working, most dedicated, hardest charging people that I've ever known in my life. I've always respected him. We've known one another since we were 10, 11, 12 years old, from a distance a little bit at first, and then we became really close friends over time, and I'll spare you the story behind that today. But I remember as kids, he was mowing yards. He made the front page of our local newspaper. He was mowing yards. He was pulling this push lawnmower behind his 10-speed bicycle. Picture the bicycles with the little wrap-up handlebars and the gears in the middle and so on with the little skinny tires. That's what he was pulling the push mower behind. And he made the paper, and it was this big celebratory story about this young kid that was earning his money, except for he wasn't earning money to do the things most of us did. I was mowing a couple of yards at the time. I was sometimes helping my dad with some side work that he had, business, home improvement business and so on. I was doing some different side work at 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 years old, learning carpentry and so on. But mine was for the nonsense that kids do, whether it's a cassette tape or a video game, or in those days, CDs were just coming out, or whatever it may have been. The fun stuff with maybe a skateboard, a bicycle. My friend was doing it to help feed his family. And for all the years that I've known him, he's been one of the hardest working, most dedicated people that I've ever been around in my life. And in this conversation, I believe it was December of 2023, I heard an emptiness. I heard just a feeling of despair almost from one aspect of his professional life, and just the most passion that I've ever heard in a different aspect of his professional life. And I won't go into all that here, but the difference in those two was really based on the purpose he was able to draw from each. And it wasn't that he didn't find purpose in one. He was just having a hard time at that point in time connecting the dots. Now, what I'll share with you is, regardless of where you're at, there's not many people that I've ever known that are as willing to work hard as him. And there aren't many people that I've ever known, regardless of the role, that would just push through some of the things that life's thrown at him the way he has. And if he was struggling to really be motivated, to have fulfillment, to make it through day to day when he wasn't connecting the dots on that purpose, my guess is you might at some point in time, or the people on your team might at some point in time as well. Now, here's a reality. I've often heard so many people say, hey, you're going to work too much, you're going to burn yourself out, and so on. And I'll get back to me in just a second. But I remember hearing a story from John Maxwell in August of 2015. I'm in a relatively small room with him. And somebody says, John, how do you, with the schedule you keep? So at that point in time, I think today, John is about 78, almost 79 years old as I share this. And at that point in time, 10 years ago, he was 69 years old. And he was speaking somewhere between 220 and 250 times a year in different cities and different countries around the world. And even if he's doing multiple times a day, which he wasn't very often, it usually meant a day somewhere else on 200 days every year. How do you maintain work-life balance? How do you do it? And John just laughed. And John's a heavier guy. He's had a little bit of up and down with his weight. He kind of belly laughs and he just chuckles at it and says, work-life balance is an illusion. There's no such thing. What you need to find is work-life harmony. And when you've got that harmony, no amount of work is too much. When you don't have harmony, any amount of work can be too much. Now, here's the reality. I've worked hard all of my life. I've just mentioned I started at 12, 13, 14 years old learning carpentry, mowing yards, and so on for frivolous stuff and so on. We won't go into that. But the reality is, I've always worked hard. That work ethic that I learned early on helped me surpass a lot of folks when I didn't have a lot of skill, when I didn't have a lot of natural talent. I could work harder and learn and grow. And it helped me get to certain things. I then had to learn to open other doors by supplementing that with different skills. That's a different story for another time. But the reality is, I can only think of one time in my professional life, and I've always had something going on the side or working multiple jobs or always carried 50, 60, 70 hours a week workload. And I can only think of one specific time that I really felt empty from or worn down or exhausted, I guess is a better word, from any of that. And it was in the last year or so when I was carrying a full-time job and we had started our business. I'm in the full-time job, probably working consistently 50 hours a week, sometimes a little less, a lot of times a little more. And in our business, it had grown to the point that I'm consistently working 30 or 40 hours a week in that. And sometimes it's spiking to 50 in that, depending on what we had going on. But I remember so many days leaving that full-time office where I'm doing HR and safety, and it was heavily at that point in time tied to compliance. And not that that's bad, it just was sucking the energy out of me. I didn't connect it to a clear purpose, where the work I was doing in our business was very, very similar, physically, mentally, and so on. But there was a very different fulfillment that I got from it, because I could see instantly how what we were doing, what Cindy and I were doing at the time, just in the early stages of our business with just a few clients, how we were able to help them do things that mattered, that made an impact on the people on their teams. And I got so much fulfillment from that I would instantly be energized. I would sit down in my car and turn it on and be ready to go to a client's office or get to my desk where I sit right now and be able to work through some of the things that I knew would make a difference, as opposed to the compliance related tasks and HR, employment law, safety, those kinds of things. And again, I'm not belittling those matter. It just wasn't connecting for me at that point in time to the purpose that I was really striving for. Now, let's think about this. Compensation. In so many different jobs, people think, gosh, if the money's enough, we'll be motivated. That's what's going to drive us. And the reality is, it's not. Compensation is often a factor in why we choose certain career paths, but it's not the factor. It's never the factor. My goodness, I've had some examples ourselves. Cindy and I have made some choices over time. I don't think I've ever in my career taken a different role on for an increase in salary. Matter of fact, most of the roles I've taken on were actually either lateral moves or decreases in salary. But the best example I saw was our son a number of years ago. I think it's probably 4 or 5 years ago at this point. He purposefully, and I use that word intentionally, chose a different career with a different company after he had earned a pretty substantial level of responsibility. He was on a cool career path. He was making solid money in his mid-20s. He had just bought a house. He had just gotten married. And he just wasn't fulfilled. He couldn't connect to the purpose. He was working a lot. He was making that money, like I mentioned, but he intentionally took a 20% cut on just his base pay, not to mention the benefits, not to mention a lot of the other things that he'd earned and built up over the 6 years he had been with that company at the time. He intentionally took a 20% cut in his base pay to move to an organization where the owner of that organization was very, very intentional about defining the purpose that his team members was working toward, and how he wanted to help each team member work toward their own individual purpose. He didn't use those words, but that's exactly what he was doing. It's a dear friend, so I know how all that worked. And it wasn't because I said, hey, friend, will you talk to my son? I did ask him to talk to my son, not to hire my son. As a matter of fact, I didn't want him to hire my son. I wanted him to mentor my son. Anyway, praise God, it worked out the way it did, but it wasn't about the pay. He took it because he saw, gosh, here's the purpose that I can move forward to. And let's be realistic here. If it were only about the compensation in anything we did, we wouldn't see so many people that are actively engaged in different nonprofits, in civic organizations. The cause, and I would go so far as to say the purpose, is what drives those folks to do what they do, to take their time, to take their money, to take their energy and put into those things where it's not compensation coming back to them. It's more about the fulfillment. One of the things I've heard so many times over the years is that, gosh, people often won't take on risk. They won't do hard work unless they're paid really, really well. And I understand, again, compensation is important, but make no mistake, people don't shy away from things because of difficulty or because of risk. And I learned that early on in behavior-based safety, but it applies in so many different scenarios. Gosh, some of my best friends in the world have served for decades and decades in volunteer emergency medical service and fire and rescue, things like that, risking their lives for people that they don't even know on their own dime and often always on their own time. And the reality is, even the folks that do it as their career, the paid, the professional firefighters, EMS, law enforcement, military, they ain't doing it for the money. They're getting shot at, they're risking getting burned up, they're doing all these crazy things at all hours of the day and night, sometimes all over the globe, at the risk of their own health and their safety and so on. Gosh, I've got a buddy named Ben that started riding his bicycle to and from a volunteer fire department a few blocks from his house. It wasn't far, but sometimes he would go to accident scenes or fires or whatever on that bicycle at 14 years old. And we were in Boy Scouts at the time. We both kind of drifted away from Boy Scouts, but he actively pursued that volunteer fire service. He's been in in the fire service for his entire career since then. Now, gosh, 35 years later, more than 35 years later, he's had some significant achievements, but he's also had some significant battles. Just a couple of years ago, he had a battle with, and he's beat. He just had some blood work done again recently. He's got a clean bill of health, but he had a pretty significant form of cancer that I remember when I had the conversation that he told me. I was one of the first not in his family or directly working with him that knew. And he says, gosh, Wes, if I live, I could lose the use of my right arm, and that would effectively end my career. And he was about 20, 25 years in service at the time. So he could have had retirement. There would have been things that came, but it would have taken away that fulfillment. I've got another buddy named Steven who, gosh, since he's sold a couple businesses, he's dedicated thousands of hours and thousands of dollars to volunteer fire service as well. So not as long as my friend Ben has, but for the same motivators. And again, they're doing it for the people that they may never know, and they're risking their lives in the process. I've got a friend named Philip who, since he turned, I think he was actually 17. I was going to say since he turned 18, he volunteered. He enlisted in the I believe it was the Army National Guard at the time, but he served overseas a number of years. I think 8, 10, 12 years in the U.S. Army and the different deployments and whatnot. He's been in law enforcement ever since. Gosh, in the time that I've known him, just over a decade, maybe going on 15 years now, I know of no less than a half a dozen times that he's risked his life. I mean, immediate life and death situation as a law enforcement officer, where he had to make decisions to where it was him or someone else, and so on and so forth. And it was never about the pay. And when we share it in more detail, I talk about how, gosh, the law of the chain and the 17 indisputable laws of teamwork. John Maxwell talks about how, hey, it's more about the goal, not the role. And I assure you, in Ben's case, in Philip's case, in Steven's case, or even my buddy Alex in his case that I'll talk about in a little bit, all of them did it for, here's my role, working towards this. It's not about the role first, and that's what mattered the most to them. It was about the goal they were working toward and that purpose they could be a part of and help achieve. My buddy Alex, I remember he shared the story. He's retired from the United States Air Force. He shares a story about, gosh, he was, I don't know, 18, 19 years old. Our lives have been very, very parallel, but in different sectors and so on. But he left a pretty solid full-time job and enlisted in the Air Force. And he gave up a lot of pay to do what he did. And it was actively, he was overseas doing a lot of different things with his life, but it was never about the pay. It was about, here's what matters. And even with what he does today, serving veterans around Virginia, and he doesn't even live in Virginia, but serving veterans, he travels all the time. He's carrying a heavy workload. He's got 5 children. He does a tremendous amount of stuff, but I know what he makes, and it's fair compensation, but he could make wildly more money in the private sector, but he does it because the heart behind it, the purpose, if you will, in what he does. Now, here's the reality. Having a clear purpose matters in every single aspect of our lives. Gosh, I was at an event just in the last 24 hours as I share this, where I'm wearing one of the jerseys that we had made for our Leadership Legacy event for the panelists for Mark Cole. It says Leadership Legacy on the front. The number's 25 on the front and the back. So I look kind of like a basketball player, but not a thin one. And I certainly can't dunk, but I could probably foul somebody pretty well at 210. But the reality is I'm wearing this on the back. It says purpose because that was the theme of the event, right? And this guy comes up to me after the concert's over and he says, "Man, I've been looking at your jersey. That's really cool." And I said, "Well, it's not a team. It's my jersey. It's for the event." He said, "No, I know. I'm reading the front. I'm reading the back and paying attention. I wanted to make sure I met you because I wanted to tell you how much those words spoke to me, how much those matter for everybody." And he gave me a little bit of his story and he went into some detail about it. And the reality is, personal or professional, that purpose absolutely matters for all of us because we all go through hard stuff. If you're taking on leadership responsibility, it can be hard every single day. I've heard John Maxwell and Mark Cole say there's no two consecutive good days in a leader's life, and that's absolutely true. But the reality is, all of us deal with that in different aspects of our lives. So it can always be it can always be tough to have two consecutively good days in any aspect of our lives, right? Especially when people are absolutely counting on us to move the needle forward. Now, here's the thing. If you cannot, with absolute certainty and clarity, define your clear purpose, let's connect. I would love to have that conversation with you. We've got some cool resources. If you look at the show notes where I'm sharing this, we've got some different things that I've put together and I want to make available. Initially, before we hit the record button on this, I had one of them set to expire at the end of September. I share this, I believe it's middle of September of 2025. I had one to expire at the end of September. Now, the coupon code for the 10% discount that you'll see in the show notes, the link, it expires. It's 10% off what I'm going to share with you. But the offer itself expires at the end of October now. I pushed it back a month so it could be available a little bit longer in case you're hearing this before. The reality is if you get this afterward, reach out to me. I'll hook you up. We'll make sure we're taking care of you. It's too good of a process to help you identify that purpose to let it die on the vine. There is one specific piece of it that it has some time sensitivity, so I can't keep it out there but so long. But the reality is we created from that 2025 Leadership Legacy Experience, we created what we call a digital game plan, where not only did we record our opening keynote, the closing keynote from Mark Cole's VIP lunch session, all around the idea of purpose, each of the 3 executive panels where we had 15 amazing leaders share how they define their purpose, how they exemplify their purpose, and how they help their team members connect with their organizational purpose and so on. We did some fantastic interviews with partners. We did it with each of the panelists. I'm going to say it's probably at least 40 hours of content in this digital game plan. It's priced at $147 for lifetime access. The caveat is contractually, we can only keep Mark Cole's VIP lunch session and his keynote through December 13, 2025. So that's why I've set the expiration date on this particular offer, but we've built some other things into it. Gosh, in the offer, we've got, if you take advantage of it in this special offer time frame, not only will you have the access to download the flipbook participant guide that we created for the event, which I'll send you. I'll need your address and some of that information if you're in the continental US. I'll send you a physical copy of that participant guidebook. We call it the playbook, if you will. I will also make sure we get you a commemorative edition, a signed copy of Leading with Clear Purpose, hard copy. We worked with our friends at BR Printers to provide those for the event. Signed, again, commemorative edition. Pretty cool book. It hit #1 on Amazon bestseller list when we released it in early 2025 as a share list. So that was a fun process. And when you access it through the link in the show notes here right now, there's also an option where you'll get a 90-day trial access to our complete Leading at the Next Level program, where we've got more than 160 hours worth of content. Every individual lesson, about an hour long each, is approved for credits through the Society for Human Resource Management, the Human Resource Certification Institute, and we've worked with a couple other entities as well. But we'll give you that 90-day trial access, and it's set so you will get a 90% off the monthly access indefinitely. So that leaves it at just $4.97 a month ongoing. If you choose to do it, you can cancel it at any time. But the reality is it's regularly $50 a month. We also do live lessons in that, where when we close the recording, we do Q&A with the participants to really walk them through the action steps that they want to take. to get that measurable return on investment. Now, I've talked a lot about the idea of leading with clear purpose. In the show notes, if none of the other stuff is of interest, Leading with Clear Purpose is available on Amazon. It's in all formats. It's on Audible. It's in ebook. It's in hard copy. It's in hardback, paperback, and so on. The link to that's here as well. But here's the thing. We've recently put together something that serves as a foundation for leading with a clear purpose. And it's really it's something we're super excited about. It's a book that I've just finished writing. I'm working through the process right now. It's called The Values Advantage, because the reality is the values that we've got identified, our core values individually, organizationally, serve as that foundation for the behaviors that we take on a daily basis to live out our purpose. How do we do that in our organizations? How do we do it in our personal lives? And it all ties back to the values. The link to the Values Advantage, that's going to be released in early 2026. It's in the show notes as well. But I've also put something in there just in case you're seeing this. Maybe you're in the Shenandoah Valley and maybe you get to take advantage of it before it fills up. We're hosting an event called the 2025 Executive Summit in just a few weeks. I think 4 or 5 weeks as I share this, where we're going to have maximum of 125 leaders in the room. And we're going to work through practical application of the Values Advantage, and not just teaching it, but we're going to facilitate interaction throughout the day with leaders within different small groups. And it's an opportunity for them to meet 12 to 15 other leaders and have intentional, tailored, strategic discussion around how they can live out their values, how they can model them for their team, and how they can hold everyone on their team to sustainable expectations so it truly creates a legacy in their organization through those values, and we can help our team members achieve that purpose. Gosh, I hope this serves you well. If you don't have access, if none of this serves you, and you just, hey, Wes, I need continuing education credit, and you mentioned some of that with that Leading at the Next Level program, send me an email at admin@dove-development.net, or if any of the other stuff is expired or you can't do it, send me an email at admin@dove-development.net, and I'll even give you a 45-day, some type of all access trial to that Leading at the Next Level program to kick the tires. And that comes with some opportunities for discounted long-term membership, monthly membership as well. But regardless, I hope this serves you well. I'm going to challenge you to really think about how you can intentionally work to continue moving the needle forward. We created this podcast as a show built to provide ongoing support for your leadership journey. And it's really based on the idea that John Maxwell shares in the law of process. I think it's law number 3 of the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership. He says leadership develops daily, not in the day. What are you doing to make sure you continue pushing things forward so you can make a positive impact on the teams and your family that are counting on you to lead? Make it a great day. We'll see you soon. God bless.